that was probably one of the most impactful things is the food. I mean, it was it was a health nut. I mean, it was unbelievable. And then almost all the stuff they made by hand. You know, the crackers, they made it themselves. They grew their own sprouts for they had alpha or lentil sprouts, and they grew their own. There was nothing they went to the store except for maybe to get some eggs or something like that. But everything was homemade, and it was incredible food. So anyway, I guess we'll. So the first thing is this map, and I'm gonna actually. So the black is the black letters are basically around Jesus' time, the territories, like this was Samaria, Judea, and I think it's pronounced Idumea or Idumea, something like that. And I had never heard of that. And when I was reading one article, they said that actually was the in the Bible was referred to Edom, which was Esau founded the. So it was basically Edom was renamed Idumea, and somewhere during the Roman time. And then, of course, in the red is current, so that's Israel. And then Jordan is over here, and then Galilee area is up here. And this big area on the right that was highlighted, that actually is the existing West Bank, which has been contentious for years because of the Palestinians wanting it. And that area here was part of Jordan until the 6-Day War, and they actually took it back. The same with up here, the Golan Heights, that used to be part of Syria, and now that's part of Israel. And right here, where it's red is Syria, that actually is Syria today. And over here, you can't see any text there, but that's actually Lebanon today. And we do have some pictures. We went right up about in here, and on the Lebanese Israeli border, and just to see it, took a couple pictures. But and then obviously the Sea of Galilee is up here. The Jordan flows down into the Dead Sea. And one of the interesting parts to me is I always heard that the Dead Sea was the lowest place on earth. And it was, in the past, they say it's over 1,300 feet below sea level, which is kind of not comprehensible to me. Anything under sea level is full of water. But anyway, everything that flows into it evaporates out. And the Sea of Galilee, which is way up above, it's 600 feet below sea level. So the Sea of Galilee is a big lake, and it's below sea level also. So when we entered, you come over a hill and drop down, and on the way down, it says you're now at sea level. And then we had to continue down to the Sea of Galilee. So it's just kind of, to me, it's kind of interesting that the areas are land that's way below sea level. So, and this is a view from our balcony when we first arrived in Israel. We went from Tel Aviv about halfway to Jerusalem in the Judean hills, and it's a Jewish messianic community that was established a long time ago, and our guide Ari was actually part of this community, and so he arranged for us to stay here. But it's just a beautiful country, and that was, what surprised me is that there was evergreen trees. I expected to see it more, drier, and I was surprised to see evergreen. Most of them were cypress, but there were some pine trees, and they really were pretty. I mean, it was really a pretty area. So on our first day, we went to Mount of Olives. And so this is on the Mount of Olives, not on the top, but it's up a ways, and you can kind of see. Well, actually, I'll just go to the next picture. It's a little close up. It's a little easier to see. Um, see the dome of the rock is right there. Hold it. Yeah, okay. I wasn't seeing it. Is right there. So this right here is the Temple Mount, and then this is the Temple Mount here, and then it turns into the Wall of Jerusalem up over into here, and that's the north wall. The south wall you can't see; it's out of sight. And but it's I always when I read stories of the Bible and Jesus talked about Mount Olives and then going into Jerusalem, I figured it was a 150-yard walk or something. And this is a long ways away from Jerusalem, and the Kidron Valley, which is right in here, the elevation from the Kidron Valley, the bottom of it, up to the Temple Mount is 200 feet. I mean, it just drops almost straight off. So if you went down in the valley and back up, you're going for quite a hike. So it was just amazing how hilly and really how pretty, but it was very hilly and lots of rocks. You know, everything was rocks. And this is a view from Mount Olives, but we're down quite a bit. We're looking more directly into the Temple Mount, and the area right in here, um, yeah, right in here. That is all tombs. That was where they just big. I mean, it looks like concrete caskets, but those are all tombs of where the cemetery, and also the Arabs back. Well, actually, it would have been the Turks when they took over the um, Jerusalem in the 1500s. They created a cemetery right here on this east gate because, and if you can't really see there, but that east gate is completely blocked. And the reason they did it is the prophecy was Jesus would come in that gate, so they blocked it up and they put a cemetery there because they knew no good Jew would go across the cemetery in. So it, kind of humorous, but that was why they did that. Now, well, if I go, I'm going to go back to the other picture. So a lot of archaeologists believe that there used to be a bridge that ran from this east gate across the Kidron Valley, so that you didn't have to go all the way down and back up. And and our guide told us that. But when I did some further research, um, some of them don't believe it really was a bridge. They think the word could have been a causeway, or it could have been meaning stairs. And one of the archaeologists, uh, Len Rittmeyer, he spent a lot of years there in Jerusalem from like the 60s until he's older than me. He's in his late 70s, so he spent a lot of years there. And this was his depiction, and they actually found some evidence of a archway in here, and so he thinks that there was actually a stairway going from this south wall of the Temple Mount up along the east gate or east wall into the east gate, which was an entrance that would face directly into the temple. Now, whether that's true or not, I don't know, but it was an interesting concept. So this is a picture of the Garden of Gethsemane, and you know, in John 18:1, when it said he had finished praying, Jesus left with his disciples and crossed the Kidron Valley onto the other side, and there was a garden. He and his disciples went into it. So this would have been the garden that he would have went into, and this is a picture of a huge trunk. I'll bet that trunk was at least 6 feet wide of an olive tree. And then this is another view of the Garden of Gethsemane, and you can see uh, right up in here. That's the east gate of the Temple Mount. So we're down quite a ways on the Mount of Olives, but it's still on the slope of Mount Olives, looking up at that east gate on the Temple Mount. And this is a picture of ruins that's below Caiaphas' house, where Peter stood outside the court of the high priest. So in John 18, 15, 16, it said, Simon Peter and another disciple were following Jesus. Because this disciple, John, was known by the high priest, he went with Jesus into the priest's high court. But Peter had to wait outside the door. Outside of the door, the other disciple, who was known by the high priest, came back, spoke to the servant girl on duty, and there brought him in. So this would have been about the area that he would have been waiting to get access into the courtyard of the high priest. And this is actually, I don't know how long ago they discovered, but they dug and found that these are the actual steps that you would have came up to go to Caiaphas' house. Caiaphas' house was just to my right of taking this picture. So they believe that this really would have been the steps that John and Peter would have ascended to go to Caiaphas. And this is the potter's field, or field of blood. So in Matthew 27, 5, 8, so Judas threw the money into the temple and left. Then he went away and hanged himself. The chief priests picked up the coins and said, it is against the law to put this into the treasury, since it is blood money. So they decided to use the money to buy the potter's field and as a burial place for foreigners. That is why it's been called the field of blood to this day. And that is that place. And our guide said that there's been many things built there and done, and he said almost nothing has been successful. And it's kind of weird. It's completely walled in. There was no activity. It just, I don't know, it's kind of weird. It's like, it's there, but it looked like it was abandoned. Now, this is an old picture, and I don't even remember what year it was, 40s or 20s, I can't remember now. This was a picture of what they used to believe was Golgotha, and part of the reason is this right there looks like a skull, and Golgotha meant skull, and so they came to the conclusion that this was the area where Jesus was crucified. Now, our guide does not believe that, but it's become quite a tourist attraction, so we went there, but he doesn't believe that this was actually the place, and part of the reason is it's way outside of Jerusalem, and whenever they had crucifixions, they liked to be close to the city walls. I mean, it had to be outside the city, but they wanted to be close to make a point so that the people would see what would happen if you didn't follow Roman rule. And then this is actually that same area. It would have been, excuse me. So it's over in here, and it doesn't look like it, but that would have been that picture that looked like a skull. I guess the what was the nose kind of fell off yours, and this is a bus parking area now. So it's kind of doesn't look quite the same as it used to. And then right next to it, so this picture is what used to be believed, or probably still a lot of people believe, this is a garden tomb, and so some of them believe this is where Jesus was crucified. Again, our guide didn't believe it because it was so far away from Jerusalem, but it is a beautiful area. It really is pretty. They've made beautiful gardens the whole area, and it's pretty nice. And then this is what they claim to have been the tomb at that garden. Now, this here, and this isn't my picture because I couldn't get up a good picture of inside of that, just the way I couldn't get up that view. This is the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, And this is where our guide believes was actually where Christ was crucified. Um, and the uh, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre was built on the orders of Constantine, who was the emperor of Rome, and that was during the Byzantine area. That when he started ruling is when they really kind of started what was called the Byzantine era, and uh, he was the first Roman that became a Christian, and so Rome became a Christian nation at that point. Um, our guide believes that it was really his mother Helena that was instrumental of it. That he kind of half-heartedly believed, but she's the one that went to Jerusalem and searched out all these spots, and they would and the church was built there to commemorate that this was the burial place of Christ. So that was a common occurrence. They would go somewhere and go, we're going to build a structure or a church to commemorate this place. And this building is, and it's a small little area. It's attached to the Holy Sepulchre, and this they believe is the actual spot that Christ was crucified. So they've built this structure around where they believe it was crucified. And what Helena did was she went back in around 300 A.D. and asked the people living there, where was Christ at? Where was this at? Trying to locate all these spots. And then this is at the Church of Sepulchre, and stone is claimed to be the actual stone where Christ's body was prepared. Now we are in Jerusalem, but we're outside the old city, and we're uh, going towards the Damascus Gate, which is the main entrance into the old city. We didn't go in that direction, but this is just a bread market. They have a lot of outdoor markets there, and this was just there was rows of people selling different merchants selling stuff, and I just thought that was interesting. There's so much outdoor marketing there. And this is a picture from the outside of the old city looking at the Damascus Gate. And the Damascus Gate is on the north wall of the city of Jerusalem, which is the upper end, which is the high end. And this picture is walking east of the Damascus Gate, but we're following the north wall. And there were some really picturesque areas there. You can kind of see where excuse me, the wall is built on bedrock there. I think there's a better picture right here. Yeah, you can kind of see right in here all this bedrock, and this here looks to me like ruined stones from an old wall or something, but they just build on top of it. So and that happened a lot in this whole area. It would come in, and everything was made of stone, and then it would get ruined, and they would just build something right on top of it. So it would end up creating a mound or a tell. And this is Herod's Gate on the north wall, and it's the farthest east gate on the north wall, and that's where we went in, which goes into the Muslim quarter of the city of Jerusalem. And as soon as we went inside the gate, this is just walked in the gate, and I turned left, and there's just a row of merchants right inside Herod's Gate. It's just kind of a pretty little area. And this is just, I got a number of pictures just walking through the streets. And, all this stuff was built a long time ago, and you can kind of, see, you can kind of see up in here, they just got cables running along, security camera, cables running across. I mean, it was all built pre-power, so they just got stuff strung all over. That's another road inside the section of Old Jerusalem, and this probably was the cleanest and neatest road I saw inside Jerusalem. A lot of it was not really very clean, and some of it was seemed to be pretty impoverished. I was kind of surprised, but this I thought was a beautiful area, and a lot of those roads are really narrow. There was a couple areas we went through. They had these really narrow little looked like a it looked like a big lawn tractor and with a trailer, and you had to stand against the wall to let them go by. It was so narrow. A lot of those roads were really narrow. And there's another picture inside. Now this is the ruins there you're looking at. Was it was an existing Byzantine church that is, fallen into ruins. But in the back end of there, probably back in here, was actually the pool of Bethesda, and there was two of them, but that was back in the far end. There was where the original pool of Bethesda was, so basically, the scripture goes along with that. Is now there is in Jerusalem near the sheep gate a pool which in Aramaic is called Bethesda, which is surrounded by 5 covered colonnades. Here a great number of disabled people used to lie: the blind, the lame, the paralyzed. Some believe that the stirring of the water was caused by mineral springs. Our guide actually stated that he believed that the water was stirred by demonic activity. And we were kind of shocked when we listened to it, because I had never heard anybody talk about that before. And what was interesting is probably a week or two ago, Lisa rewatched the parts of The Chosen, and they actually hinted about demonic activity at the Pool of Bethesda on that on that episode of The Chosen. So I'm not really sure, but some of them believe that there was a mineral pool. But the odd part was it was a mineral pool. Why did just once in a while it would bubble up? And then this is near the Pool of Bethesda, and below the where the previous picture was taken. And this sign states that Jesus heals the sick near these medicinal baths. So there was a plaque made quite a while ago for that. And this was an old church that was, I'm assuming it was during the Byzantine area again, but it was an old church, and our guide asked, everybody can sing, come up in front, and just for the acoustics. I mean, it was pretty neat. It really had some pretty neat acoustics. And as you can tell, I'm taking a picture, not singing. And this is called the Sturthium Pool, and it was originally an open cistern, later converted to be part of the moat around Antonia Fortress. So the Antonia Fortress was attached on the north end to the Temple Mount, and it was Herod would, it was kind of a protection. The north end was vulnerable to attacks because of it was a hill went up, where on the east side was the Kidron Valley, on the south side there was the Hinnon Valley, and then there was a valley that went along the west wall. So if anybody tried to attack, they had to go down and come back up. But the north wall was elevated. It was a hill behind it, so it was very vulnerable. So they built this fortress to kind of protect that. And so this became part of a moat. And today it's all underground. But it was in Jesus' time, this would have been a moat around the Antonia Fortress. I don't believe there was water in that one. I can't remember, to be honest with you. Most of it was dry, but that may have had water. I can't really remember now. And this was a tunnel that was, close to that uh, pool, or what was the last one? Oh, the Struthian pool. It was a little tunnel. So they had lots of underground water coming in, and they had to do, because it was pretty arid in a lot of the area. Originally, Jerusalem, the pool of Gihon Springs, and David mentioned about it, that was their main water supply. But when it got big, when Jerusalem got big enough, they had to bring water in from somewhere else because there wasn't enough to supply. And this, again, is an underground area, and this was part of what would have been Antonio Fortress. And it just is pretty amazing, the structure, the arches, and everything's made out of rock. And it was just another view. We just walked a little farther and looked. And if you look on the bottom there, let's see, right in here, these are great big stones. And those were original pavement stones of the Antonio Fortress years ago. And up above, it was destroyed, a lot of it, and then they built new buildings on top. But this has all been exposed underneath. And a lot of the stuff that was underneath, they actually excavated and found it. It just got buried and forgotten. And while we were underground on that area that was part of Antonio Fortress, there was this was a glass enclosed area with these different jars and containers. And actually, I wasn't going to take a picture of it because it wasn't very good lighting, and I went, oh, I can never get this picture to look good. But Lisa wanted to get a picture of it because these right here are tear bottles, and I had never heard of such a thing. But what they did is, if somebody died and there was a I forgot what they called it, but they were mourning. The more tears shed, the more that showed that they were cared for. So they would literally capture tears in a bottle to save them as a sign that he was cared for, that he was loved. But anyway, it was and I guess they actually used to hire mourners to shed tears so they could collect more tears. What's that? Well, and it's a rock wall, and of course I did a lot of manipulating to get the picture. There was a right about here, there was a glass wall with a seam, and I removed it. so it looks a lot different than the original picture. And then it's just another road. Usually there's markets, but we're just walking around from one place to another. And what we were really doing is we went into the northeast side and then went to the Pool of Bethesda, and then we started meandering over, which would have been from the east to the west to see other sites. So this was just part of our travels and we spent all day in the city of Jerusalem. So we really didn't get to see a lot. We were quickly traveling from one place to another, and it was a little confusing. As a matter of fact, we wanted to go back. As a matter of fact, we were going to go back in in September, end of September, 1st October, and we were just going to fly in, go to Jerusalem, spend 4 or 5 days there, and just walk around Jerusalem, just to take our time and see what was there. We didn't get to see the city of David. I wanted to go see it. And about 4 weeks before we were getting ready to go, Lisa felt like God told her, no, don't go. And so in the end, went, okay, well, I feel like we shouldn't go, we won't go. And we would have been in Israel when October 7th. So that's when we would have planned to been there. So we avoided being there when Hamas hit them. Now we probably would have been safe because we would have been in Jerusalem, but still, it would have been a pain to getting out. And this is the infamous Western Wall, or the Wailing Wall, in Jerusalem, and uh, and it's really a pretty small part. I mean, it is very tall, but it's a small part of the Western Wall. Um, this this area here is, all structure. It's built, and then if you continue straight along that Western Wall, there's buildings all up against it, so you don't even see most of the Western Wall because there's structures right up against it. And this is Mir, who we prayed for a couple weeks ago, um, and he was a soldier that was at the Western Wall while we were there. And actually, when I looked at some other pictures, there's huge crowds there. When we were there wasn't that many people, and I'll bet at least 60 or 70% of them were all soldiers. And I guess they had a graduation, so they all were there. So there was a huge number of soldiers there. And so I got done taking pictures, and I'm standing around trying to find everybody else in the group. And he walks up to me and said, "Hey, will you take some pictures of me kissing the wall and send them to me?" And I go, "Well, my camera, I can't just send them to you. I have no Wi-Fi or any of this." He goes, "No, no, no. Take them home and do whatever, and then send them to me later." I go, "Okay." So he gave me his phone number, and so I took a few pictures and sent them back to him. So it was kind of a weird connection. Now, this is a picture that I found. Obviously, I didn't take it because I couldn't get up in the air. Um, and I wanted it because um, it's a pretty interesting view of it. So you can see that the Western Wall here, and then all these structures here that prevent you from even seeing the wall. And you can see it's pretty high there. But if you go over here, this arch or this walkway, that is the entrance for the non-Muslims to go up onto the Temple Mount. If you're a Muslim, you go in over on this street. But if you're a non-Muslim, this is the only way you can get up in there. And this here is the southern end of the Eastern Wall, and you can't see it very well, but it's a lot farther down, and that's because they actually excavated some of the rubble there. And I've got another picture that actually shows it better, but this whole area right here that is now the Wailing Wall is probably at least 50 feet higher than what it used to be. It's just been from rubble and then just building on top of it. And I took this picture to kind of show it. So this is the Wailing Wall right here, and then I think this is the women's court right next to it. But over here, you can see it drops down quite a bit. It's a lot farther down. And what they did was they excavated and found some of the original stones that the Romans toppled. And the level now is what would have been the road that Jesus would have walked on to go up to the temple. And so it's pretty interesting. Let's see, what is it? There, that where that white circle is. There's at the bottom of the image is it was a top cornerstone that was they call it a trumpeter stone, but I think it said something in Hebrew, the place of the trumpet. And so they believed that was a place on the corner where during when Sabbath would come around, whatever time it would be, they would blow the trumpet to announce the starting of the Sabbath or whatever holiday. So it was kind of an interesting find, and I think I've got another picture of it. Oh, I got a video here. So we got um, Kevin. Oh yeah. Here, let me go back. Got it?
Okay, so this stone here was up there on the corner. Okay, you can see the corner over there. And you can see a picture here. This is where the priest would blow a shofar, most likely, and he would announce, because down here behind you were shops, over here were shops, and so he would blow and announce that to cease, now the Sabbath is starting, or whatever holy day is starting. That's just another piece of evidence. It's quite substantial that lets us know that this was the Temple Mount, okay? And so the upper part is a replica. The original is in the museum, but the other is genuine. So it has written on here in Hebrew, "To the place of the trumpeting two." So what you're seeing here is, again, just evidence of that. And now we have over here, beside the wall here, you can see all this damage done here. You see, this was the original road. Jesus would have walked on this road. Jesus would have been here, okay? So this is the original. And when these massive stones came down that the Romans threw down, then they just absolutely crushed this pavement here, this stone pavement.
Anyway, I thought that was interesting because it actually showed that stone, and I had no pictures of the stone, so I took a little clip out of it. Excuse me. And this is in the Coptic area, and the Coptic Christians live there. And this probably was the most impoverished. Our guide said that the people who live there are really poor, and it's really primitive. Now, this is an image of what they called the Byzantine Cardo, and it was when Helena went there. She wanted to build a lot of stuff, so they built this. They called the main road the Cardo, and if I remember right, our guide said that's where we get the word cardio, and so it was kind of the life of the city, and so a lot of the main roads were called Cardos. And so this was an image of what the Cardo looked like when it was structured, and it had overhangs and and with markets underneath it, and then the road in the middle. And this is some of the columns that's left on the Cardo. So some of those columns are still there. Now this is the Zion Gate, which is on the let's see, the southern wall of the city. And see all those pock marks? Those were bullet holes or marks from bullets during the 6 Day War when the Israelis went into Jerusalem for the first time. The Arabs were shooting at them, and that's remnants of what happened. Now, this is the upper room, which is today inside well, actually, it's outside the city wall. But in Acts, when the day of Pentecost came, they were all together in one place. Suddenly, a sound like a blowing of a violent wind came from heaven and filled the whole house where they were sitting. They saw what seemed to be tongues of fire that separated and came to rest on each of them. All of them filled with the Holy Spirit and began to speak in other tongues as the Spirit enabled. So they believe this is the place where that actually happened. Just another view of the upper room. And this is as we left Jerusalem leaving, we walked out, and this is a view of the western wall, grassy area. It was actually a very pretty area. Not a lot of it. A lot of the walls don't have grass like this, so it was really a park-like setting. Now, this is a model of Jerusalem, and it was at, no, I can't remember. It was one of the museums. It was a museum we went to. I can't remember what the name of it, Israeli museum, but it was in Jerusalem, outside the old city, but it was part of Jerusalem. And this guy built this replica of Jerusalem. I don't know, a long time ago, but he built it out in a piece of property, and it was very popular for people to come. They'd have tours, and it was in a residential area with hotels, and people didn't like getting interrupted at 8 in the morning by tour guides with speakers. So they decided to disassemble it. So they cut it up in pieces and moved it to the museum where it exists today. And so so this right here is the Kidron Valley. The dome of the mosque would be right up in here, and the east wall and Mount of Olives would be off to the right here. And then this is the Hinnon Valley going up this direction. So it was surrounded by valleys on at least three sides. And there used to be a valley right in here that is really no longer existing. It just got filled in. Whoops. Yeah, okay, I want that. So this is a model of the same model of Jerusalem, but the red line highlighted, this area is what is known as the city of David. So when David went and took it from the Jebusites, I think it was, they went in through the Gihon Springs tunnel underground and came up and took it over. So this was David's city, called the city of David. And when Solomon built the temple, the Temple Mount, in this image, the Temple Mount is actually bigger than when Solomon built it, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. And then when Solomon built the temple, he added the walls and these yellow lines here, and expanded it. So this was the city of David before Jerusalem became Jerusalem. And this here, so we've heard in Hezekiah's time where he built a tunnel, and what he did was the Gihon Springs, it was right here, and what it did, it came out of the rocks underground, and then came out into the spring here, and it was open to enemies, whatever, and so Hezekiah said, well, if I can bring the water supply inside instead of out, then we can have water and our enemies will not have water. So he actually went back into where the water was underground and dug a tunnel, and that followed this line loosely, and it went into the Pool of Siloam here. And so they had their water supply inside the wall, and the enemies would not have access to water. And when they did this, they started from both ends. And as you can see, it's not a straight line. So how in the heck they ever figured out how to meet in the middle is beyond me. And I did watch some videos of it, and some of it it's some of it you can stand up in, but it's shoulder wide, maybe a little wider. I mean, it's not very wide. It's more tall and fairly narrow, and it still has water running through it. Some areas it's about that deep, other areas a little deeper. And the elevation difference between one end and the other is like 1 foot. And how they did that accurately, nobody knows. I mean, it's pretty amazing feat for that time. And this is a picture of, so the blue line is the first wall of Jerusalem, and then and the red also was included. But the green area, green or Yeah, the green line is what the walled city looks like today. So that when they built the wall today, which was in, let's see, what was it? Suleimani. In the 16th century, Suleiman decided to rebuild the city walls on the remains of the ancient walls that had already existed. However, much of the southern wall, which is the outside of that green line to the blue, was omitted from the new construction. Solomon desired to have the original blue walls included, but because the architects failed to do so, he had them beheaded. But he honored them by his tombs are still their tombs are still in the inside the walled city, but but he had them beheaded, but he honored them by putting their tombs right by the wall. Uh, and basically, except for the southern end, the walls of Jerusalem have existed pretty much the same today as they did then. So in the Maccabee period, they whoops this blue line here, the Maccabeans expanded that uh, and made the wall a little bigger. They needed more room, and the Maccabees were the founding fathers of the Hasmonean dynasty. The Maccabees originally rebelled against the Greeks and gained limited self-rule for quite a few years before the Romans gained control and assigned Antipater, which was the father of Herod the Great, ruler in 62 BC. And then Herod the Great took over in 37. But there was a lot of politicking. I mean, it wasn't like he just took it over. It was like, oh, you side, because Rome at that time had multiple rulers and there was fights. And so if you sided with the right one, you'd get favor. So there was a lot of underhanded stuff, much like what goes on today. So on this picture, the the yellow line is the third wall that includes all of Jerusalem like today, and it was started about 40 A.D. by King Agrippa the First, and but it wasn't finished until after his death in 66 A.D. And so the third wall didn't exist when Jesus was there. The second wall was part of or was part of Jerusalem. So so the Holy Sepulchre, which is where they believe that Jesus died, was out in here. So it would have been outside the city walls at the crucifixion. So after his death, then it became part of the city because they wouldn't allow the crucifixion inside the walled city. So I found this picture, and it showed basically the old city of Jerusalem today. And so you can see how it's divided up. The Muslim quarter is up here, the Christian quarter is over in this section, and then the Armenian quarter here, and then the Jewish quarter here. So it's kind of divided up into different segments. You know, when we were walking through, I couldn't tell the difference. They would just say, "Oh, you're now in the Armenian area," but and the Holy Sepulchre is right here. Let's see what else was there. And then City of David's now outside over here, and you can kind of see the walls. There's the East Gate or the Golden Gate that is prophesied that Jesus would enter again. The Dung Gate down here, and and it's interesting, you know, the refuge, it's the low end of the city. So I mean, if you dumped water or junk sewer, it would run out that area. So it just naturally became the Dung Gate. And the Zion Gates here, you know, so they just kind of a example of how the city's laid out with the Temple Mount up in here. So I put this in because I was always confused about Herod. And so it ended up that there was really, see how many? There was Herod the Great, and then he had three of his sons that ruled, and then later on, Agrippa, which was, well, actually, I'll go. So Herod, whose family had converted to Judaism during the territorial conquest of the Hasmonean king John Hyrcanus, however that's pronounced, um, also had no inherent legitimacy to the eyes in the eyes of the people and maintained his power mainly through Roman intervention. Among his many excesses in the process of ensuring the power, Herod had ordered the execution of most members of the Jewish aristocracy who had supported Aristobulus, the last of the Hasmonean rulers. And so, and the Hasmoneans kind of did it themselves. They fought amongst themselves, and then the Romans said, okay, we're tired of this fighting, we're going to do something. But Herod played enough politics that he got approval to basically have control of the land. And he became Herod the Great because he liked to build fancy palaces, buildings. I mean, the city of Caesarea, which we have some pictures of it a little bit later, he built the city of Caesarea. He built the second temple, and the palace fortress at Masada. And the second temple, even it's ironic because the second temple was built when they came back from Babylon, and they built the second temple. But what Herod basically did is he rebuilt it. It's still considered the second temple, but they didn't trust Herod. He wanted to build a new temple, so he ended up building the temple over top the old one. And then when he finished it, he tore down the old one. And the old one was not as extravagant. He built a very extravagant building. So when I took a little verse of each one of these. So when the Magi had gone, the angel of the Lord. This is Matthew 2:13-15. Appeared to Joseph in a dream. Get up, he said. Take the child and his mother and escape from Egypt. Stay there until I tell you, for Herod is going to search for the child to kill him. So he got up and took the child and his mother during the night and left for Egypt, where he stayed until the death of Herod. And so this was Herod the Great. And so he died when Jesus was very young. So after his death, Philip, the tetrarch of Iturea, he had an area that included part of Syria, northeast, and then the verse that talked about him is Luke 3:1. In the 15th year of the reign of Tiberius Caesar, when Pontius Pilate was governor of Judea, Herod the tetrarch of Galilee, his brother Philip the tetrarch of Iturea, and Trachonius, and Lysanias, tetrarch of Abilene. So that was a verse in the Bible, and it was actually referring to Philip, and there really wasn't much about him except for that. And then Herod Archelaus, this was the one that, but when he heard that Archelaus was reigning in Judea in the place of his father, Herod, and they're talking about, this is Joseph. He was afraid to go there, having been warned in a dream. He withdrew to a district of Galilee and went and lived in a town named Nazareth. So was fulfilled what was said about Jesus through the prophets, that he would be called a Nazarene. And so anyway, it's kind of interesting, the different Herods. And then Agrippa, and I didn't realize that, but Agrippa was the first, was the grandson of Herod the Great. And then later on, Agrippa the second. and both of them are in the Bible. You know, matter of fact, well, I think I got something later on that. Oh, let's see. Oh, so on Agrippa the first, then Herod went from Judea to Caesarea and stayed there. He had been quarreling with the people of Tyre, and actually, this was what Kevin just read last Sunday. And so it basically failed to, um, they praised him like a god. He failed to relinquish it, and the Lord struck him, and he died of worms 5 days later. And I've got a commentary that said that Agrippa the first liked to flaunt his power. His self-displayed had unfortunately led to anti-Jewish riots in Alexandria earlier. His public meeting with these emissaries in the theater of Caesarea, and his grandfather built the town of Caesarea. Um, the foundation of the theater is still there today. According to Josephus, the speech occurred on a festival, but they thought it might have been in honor of the emperor's birthday. But first the first Jewish historian Josephus reports that on the occasion Agrippa, oh shoot, what? Yeah, he was after he got sick. Um, he 5 days later died, and I guess it was a. They said in those days, death from bowel disease and worms were among the most horrible. And then Agrippa the second. A few days later, King Agrippa and Bernice arrived in Caesarea to pay their tributes to Festus, and this is when Paul went and wanted to go. When the Jews wanted to kill him, he wanted to go. He pleaded, "I can, I'm a Roman citizen. I want to go under rule or under the court of Caesar." So this is where he went. And when I read it in the past, I always thought King Agrippa and Bernice was his wife, but according to the chart, Bernice was his sister. And I threw this in just kind of to show the areas of so that one of the Herods controlled this Samaria, Judea, Iberia. Another one controlled Galilee and Perea, and then Philip controlled this area, which is lower part of Syria today and Golan Heights. So they kind of spread the power around, but it was interesting because it had to go through Rome's approval to let them rule. So Rome was still in control, but as long as you were, doing Rome, keeping peace and appeasing Rome, they would let you rule. So this is an aerial view, and the only reason I threw this in, this is a picture I found, is just you can see how deep this Kidron Valley is. It's just way down. It just drops down really quick. It's hard to capture how steep that terrain was. And when we were driving around in Jerusalem the first day, we went roads that were switchbacks, and I remember thinking, this is worse than any road I've ever been in San Francisco. I mean, there was really some steep terrain there. It's pretty amazing. So this is a picture of the Temple Mount today, and the whole area is much bigger than the original Temple Mount. The Temple Mount, well, if you see right in here, these stairs right here do not line up with this platform. They're at an odd angle, and so they believe that those really were Solomon's stones. that was the original Western Wall before Herod expanded it. And then later on, the Hasmoneans expanded this area right here. So this was, they believe, the original Temple Mount. Hasmoneans expanded this east wall a little bit. And then Herod expanded it to the current size it is today. And it goes off this picture off to the left. But it was a pretty good view of it. So he expanded it a lot. And he also made this western wall, it became a trapezoid at that time. It wasn't a rectangle anymore, or a square. So we got audio. There's a short video describing this these stones that they believe were the original western wall that's part of the steps to the Dome of the Rock. I thought, to me, this was interesting.
See how this stone is different from this stone here? And then you see these stones, how big they are? You see how these are changed? This is the original wall of the Solomon's Temple Mount platform here. Right here is the corner. Then it goes from here and it follows basically the edge of the Muslim platform to the eastern wall. From right here to the eastern wall measures exactly 861 feet, 262 meters, 500 cubits. Exactly. And then from the eastern wall down there, there is part of the wall that protrudes out because there was a tower down there. This right here, we know, is the northwest corner of Solomon's Temple Mount platform here. Now also, do you notice how this wall here, look down that wall there, that runs perpendicular with the Muslim platform? See how the angle changes? So the original went down, right down there. Okay? The Muslim platform doesn't run parallel with the eastern wall. This does. This is the parallel line from the eastern wall. So from right here to the eastern wall is 500 cubits, 861 feet, 262 meters. From here to where we were at down there, 861 feet, 262 meters, 500 cubits. And this once again runs exactly parallel with the eastern wall. So this is how Lane was able to calculate that this was the corner. Then also by archaeology down at the Barclay Gate, and by seeing some bends in the walls and changes in the stones on the additions that were made. So we can see where the Hasmonean addition platform enlargement began because the stones change. And there's a curious bend in the wall that kind of goes out. When you look down, you can kind of see it. There's a bend in the wall. So once again, we have exactly 500 cubits, 861 feet, 262 meters, exactly. From that point down there to the bend in the wall, 500 cubits, 861 feet, 262 meters. From here to there, 500 cubits, 861 feet, 262 meters. So we know this is the original platform that Solomon built. We also know that these are ancient stones because we can't see the boss now. You remember what a boss is? Okay. This has been filled in. We have photos, Lane took them back in the 1960s that show this was lower. And it showed the boss of these stones. They're a different type of boss. They're the same boss that can be found at the lower part of the eastern gate. There are ancient stones down there. A lot of the eastern wall has been rebuilt, but part of it has not been rebuilt. So there are ancient stones with this type of boss dating back to Solomon's time that are at the base of the eastern gate, at the base of the eastern wall. I want to show you here these stones. You can tell by the boss. This is the boss right here. This here sticks out. You can see that the way this is the way it sticks way out is that this is from Solomon's time. This is how we know this. These are Solomonic stones, or later during Hezekiah's time. You can just tell by the bosses and the outlines in these stones here. They're just very, very different than the other stones up above. So these are the original stones of the Temple Mount platform that Solomon would have built. Absolutely unbelievable to think about this.
So this is a drawing again from Len Rittmeyer, and the blue line, or the blue area highlighted, this area right here, that's the existing dome of the mosque right now, and it sits over the rock that, and that's what the Dome of the Rock is. It was actually, I didn't realize at the time, but it's built over that rock, and that is what most people believe was the rock, Mount Moriah, the rock that Abraham went up to sacrifice Isaac before the Lord intervened and provided a lamb or a ram. So anyway, so this is the way the Dome of the Rock is laid out, and this is what Lane believes would be how the temple was laid out in its original. Now, some people argue that the temple wasn't there, but I have a tendency to believe it. Just, but anyway, it's I think that it definitely had to be somewhere on there because there's too much evidence that Temple Mount has always been the Temple Mount. Let's see. So this is an image, an old black and white from inside the Dome of the Rock, looking down at the rock, and so it's pretty amazing. I was surprised that it was exposed, and as a matter of fact, I think I said something to Larry Russell about it. Well, why wouldn't the Muslims try to hide it? If that was the rocket, and he goes, well, they have their own beliefs on it, so they, and also that area where it said that there's a little cutout where it says Ark of the Covenant, and they believe that matches the dimensions of the Ark, and they believe that the Ark actually sat there in that little cutout. Whether that's true or not, nobody really knows. But anyway, this Mount Moriah is visible, and this rock is where the Jews believe Abraham was about to sacrifice Isaac. And the Muslims believe that this is where the Prophet Muhammad ascended in the divine presence on the back of the winged horse, the miraculous night journey, which I'm not familiar with, which is commemorated by the Dome of the Rock structure. And I didn't realize it, but the Dome of the Rock is not a mosque. It's just a structure commemorating that rock. The mosque is actually off to the side next to it. So this is a view in the Judean area. I'm not sure exactly where, I can't remember now. But this is a hill of Zorah where Samson was born. So I just wanted to get a picture of it's up on a hill, kind of a pretty little area, but this is where Samson was born. And then that's just kind of a panoramic view. Lisa used her camera or phone and took a panoramic view of it so you get more into the picture. So then this next day, we're heading to the Dead Sea. And so I threw this map in here to kind of show that Jerusalem in here, and if you went over the hill, the road, it actually goes up above the Dead Sea, and then you travel down. So we ended up going to Masada and Gede, and then Qumran, and then we went into the Dead Sea and I'll say swam, but basically floated in it. And on our way there, we're going over the hills over to the desert, and these were some present-day Bedouins who are a nomadic Arab tribe their name Bedouin actually means desert dweller, and they still live in little shacks and just travel around. Nomadic. There's still a bunch of them doing that. I was kind of surprised. I thought it was a thing of the past. And then this is Lisa and I at Qumran, the actual the museum or whatever the center there. And these are Qumran sites. So there was the Qumran caves, which is where the Dead Sea Scrolls were. They would have been up in the hills up in here. I mean, it could have been probably wasn't right here, but there's caves all over in these hills, and so they found those caves and the Dead Sea Scrolls, and they believe the group living there at the Qumran were the sect called Essenes, and the Essenes were a Jewish mystical sect somewhat resembled Pharisees. They had lived lives of ritual purity and separation. They had originated about 100 BC, and interest in the Essenes was renewed when they discovered the Dead Sea Scrolls, which they were likely recorded by them and stored in jar clays, later discovered. And it's pretty miraculous. I think they found a pretty complete copy of Isaiah. There are a lot of fragments, but Isaiah, and they were amazed at how accurate the modern texts really were from the texts that they found. They said the only differences were really punctuation and spelling. Other than that, they were just accurate. And so there's just another view of the Qumran, the ruins there. I think this here was in that foreground, round area was a cistern. They had to store water. I mean, it was just a desert over there, just dry as could be. Now, this is, I found a picture, aerial view of Masada, because we went up there and you really couldn't get a picture of what it looked like from getting back. And so this area here was Herod's palace and a bunch of structures up on top. And then this was actually the siege ramp that was built by the Romans to capture it. So, and when Herod built it, he built it, they called it a fortified palace. And so it had storehouses, it had a palace, storehouses. It had 9 apartment type living quarters grouped around an open air court. Then in 66 AD, the Jewish sect known as the Sicarii took over the Masada to obtain the weapons that were stored there and to launch attacks against the Romans. Then in 73 AD, the Romans were tired of rebels, and so they went there to capture it. They built a siege ramp to the top to capture them, only to discover that they had taken their own lives first before they got there. And I just took a picture. This is a cable car that we rode from the bottom there. You can walk up it, but it's quite a walk. And actually, I would have loved to have done it, but we didn't have the time. And of course, at that point, my pinched nerve was bad enough I couldn't have walked it. But anyway, I just thought that was a pretty interesting view. It's a long ways up, and although those the rectangles there, that was where the Roman barracks were when they came there to take over Masada. So just another view from the platform, from the tram platform ramp going up to the top. And then this is just a view of the top of the ruins, and then that's the Dead Sea in the background there. And this a picture of ruins of Herod's palace. And there was some of the ruins up there. Just took a few pictures, and this still amazes me. This was, part of this has been rebuilt, but this was a sauna that Herod built. And why anybody would want a sauna in the middle of a desert, I don't know. I mean, I'd be trying to figure out how to get cool, not to get hot. But anyway, this was a sauna that he had up there. And this is Engedi Springs Falls. And again, this is out in the middle of the desert. Right there where you can see the green, that's the only green. And there's where that little spring creek runs out. There's vegetation there, but you get very far, get away from that creek, it's just all desert. And this is a picture of caves along Engedi. And so on this one, so in 1 Samuel 24, after Saul returned home from pursuing the Philistines, he was told, David is in the desert of Engedi. So Saul took 3,000 able young men from all of Israel and set out to look for David and his men. Near the crags of the wild goats, he came to the sheep pens along the way. A cave was there, and Saul went in to relieve himself. David and his men were far back in the cave. The men said, "This is your day the Lord spoke of when he said, I will give you your enemy into your hands, and you will deal with them as you wish." Then David crept unnoticed and cut a corner of Saul's robe. So where the caves were in that area, but I don't know. But I just took a picture, and there's caves all over that whole area, and it's obviously really, just dry and desert. And that green that you're seeing in the lower is where the Engedi Springs runs. So if you get anywhere away from that, there's no vegetation. And then it's just a picture of us on our way down to the Dead Sea. It was a long walk down there. As a matter of fact, there used to be resort areas along the Dead Sea, and the Dead Sea is receding, and part of it is that there's more demand for water, so they're taking it out of the Jordan, and so the Dead Sea is now like 1,400 feet below sea level, and when it drops down, there's caves that get exposed, and then everything collapses. So there was actually some resorts that we saw that were just ruins. The caves underneath would collapse when the water receded, and so they had to abandon all these areas that people used to go to. So now the only place you can go get in the Dead Sea is up on the north end. But Israel, well, I think about it, they have a plan that they came up with all kinds of ideas, but the last one was they've got a desalination plant, and they're going to pump water from the Mediterranean up to the Sea of Galilee and try to replenish the water in the Dead Sea. And there's a picture of some of us in our group out there. A terrible picture, but anyway, it is pretty amazing how much you just float. And the bottom is, it feels like rock, but all it is rock or mineral crystals. It's sharp, it's jagged. When I got out, my shoes were completely destroyed. I had sandals, and they completely fell apart. Now, this is a picture of the road to Emmaus. We were, when we took off and we were heading north in the morning, our guide pulled over and went up this, looked like to us just a gravel road, and he goes, "This is part of the road to Emmaus." And of course, part of the road to Emmaus, got paved. Because he said as a kid he would drive on a road and they ended up paving it. It was part of the original road to Emmaus. So this is one that has not been paved, and you can see right here these stones here and here. The original stones left from the Roman road to Emmaus. So now we're heading north up to Galilee, and so I just took this picture or this part of the map, and so we're gonna when we head north, we're gonna go up here to Caesarea, which is Herod the Great built that city, and then we continue on, and we're going up to let's see, we go to where's Megiddo? Right here. Went to Megiddo and then ended up going up to Galilee and we can actually go up about in here to the Lebanese border and then over here in Golan Heights. So this next couple days is just up in Galilee. So I found an illustration that showed Caesarea before it was destroyed. And so this here is Herod's palace. This is a theater that was built. And then this is a Colosseum where they would have races. They said horse races. I don't know if it was really, oh, shoot, what do they call them? Not a carriage. Chariot, yeah. I don't know if they were chariots or what they had, but they had races there. And then out of the picture down below was a huge harbor that was completely enclosed in, so it was ships could come in, and there was just a little opening and protected from waves. It was pretty spectacular, the city, when he built it. So this is an image of the Colosseum, and if you look like right back in here, that's the backside of the Colosseum, the steps, and then it would come around, and the other side would have been right in here, but it is all gone. And what I found is interesting when I was reading, we bought a book on Jerusalem or the history of it. Our guide was encouraging you to buy this, and I found a lot of information out of it. But one of the things that they said was that Herod the Great built the Colosseum and Caesarea in general, and in 79 A.D. the eruption of Mount Vesuvius brought tsunami waves to the shores of Israel, laying waste to much of the town of Caesarea. And so that's explained why the water side of the stands would be gone. That would be the hardest hit. And our guard, Ari, I don't know if I mentioned it earlier, but he was a Messianic Jew, and he was born in, I think, 47, and Israel became a nation in 48. So he either moved there when he was an infant or he was born there. I can't remember now the story, but he's lived in Israel basically his whole life. And he said that when he was a child, they would go to where the Colosseum stands and play on the sand there, and it was completely covered. The stands were completely covered. They didn't know it, and so they would play up there. And years later, the archaeologists came and discovered that there was stands underneath it and cleared the sand off. So a lot of this stuff was just, and that's one of the things that Israel did when they took over, or excuse me, the Jews, when they took over Israel, they started excavating, and the Arabs, the Palestinians, they weren't interested in finding any of the old historic things, and they have found so much since they've been. And then in Jerusalem, they didn't have control of Jerusalem until 67, and so they've done lots of excavation around Jerusalem since 67. And this is a picture of what's left of the ruins of Herod's palace, and that rectangular area would have been where his pool is, or where his pool would have been, and that would have been a freshwater pool. But so it was quite a structure in his day. And this the theater still exists. This is looking at the right side of the theater, and then this is a left side view. So a lot of the stuff out to the left is gone, but the theater itself is pretty much intact. And so this is what the theater looks like today. And it was like a 180-degree circle with the stage on the front, and I'm standing on what would have been the stage. And this area right here was for VIPs. And so, excuse me. So the next day, this is Acts 25:23. The next day, Agrippa II, and Bernice came with great pomp and entered the audience room with high-ranking military officials and prominent men of the city. At the command of Festus, Paul was brought in, and that area right up in here would have been where Agrippa would have sat. And so most people recognize that. I call him McGrippa. McGrippa and Roxanne. And so this is Megiddo, and these are the ruins, and it's a hill. They call it a tell, but it's basically where it started out a little mound, and then they build a city, and it would get ruined. They build another city, and now the hill is quite a bit bigger than it used to be. And this ruins is and the valley is where most believe the Battle of Armageddon will take place. And of course, then in Revelation 16:16, they gathered together the kings to the place that is Hebrew is called Armageddon, which literally means Mount Megiddo or Hill of Megiddo. And this here is just more images of the ruins, and then this is an image of Solomon's stables. Solomon built stables there. And you got audio on again? So this is
now.
Whoops.
Now the name Armageddon is derived from the term Har Megiddo, which is translated Armageddon. Har means hill, and Megiddon is the place. So when put together, it's called Armageddon, and in English the H is taken off, so it's Armageddon in English. Today this place is called Megiddo in English. It's located in the most fertile valley of Israel called the Jezreel Valley, and you can see the Jezreel Valley right in the background, and we'll be panning around here to show you that. It's a tell which is made up of layer upon layer of different civilizations that make up an artificial hill, but there was a hill here to begin with, and then they built upon it for defense purposes. More battles have been fought here than in any other place on earth. Now, why is that the case? Because Megiddo lied at the juncture of several key routes. The main route called the Via Maris, which linked Africa to Asia and Europe. For this reason, any country who rose to world power had to control Megiddo due to its strategic location. And you can still see today the highway here runs by. It's a very busy highway. Why? Because it follows the original Via Maris. And many of the roads here in Israel are the same roads that were trafficked for thousands and thousands of years. So it's a very important place. One of the pharaohs, Thutmose III, said conquering Megiddo is like conquering 1,000 cities. Why? Because it was so important. Now, King Solomon fortified this city and used it as a fort of protection. He had 450 chariots stationed here, and you can see the stables in this video here where he had those. King Ahab later built an amazing water tunnel here to protect it from its enemies. And so you can see down in this tunnel here where he carved it out so he could get water inside the city, so that warring armies outside couldn't stop their water supply and then dry them up, cause them to die of thirst. The city gate entrance was on the northern side of the tell. Before the Israelites and Solomon used the tell, the Canaanites lived here and erected gates with 4 towers. Then Solomon, later on, erected larger and more sophisticated gates in his day, consisting of 6 towers and gates. There was also the sacred area in the middle of the tell, where Canaanites erected around 17 temples in order to worship their false gods. There is also a round altar and burial chambers found here where they sacrificed animals and maybe even their children to these false gods. Located on the northern side of Megiddo and the southern side of Megiddo are 2 palaces dating to the time of Solomon. A grain silo dating to the time of King Jeroboam is located here, which used to have a roof over it.
And I probably should have cut it off shorter than that. But the biggest thing it was just to get an aerial view of the area. It is. They said that when we got there, I wish I'd have taken a picture, but they said the original height of that hill was less than half of what it is today, because they just kept piling rocks on top of rocks. And as we left there, we were driving down the road, and there's a bunch of open range shepherding near Megiddo. Just one guy's on a horse, another one's on a 4-wheeler. So what's that? No camel there. So this is a church of the primacy of Peter, and behind me, as I was taking this picture, is the Sea of Galilee, where Jesus told Peter to cast his net on the right side of the boat. And so this church was built here commemorating that. And this is a view of the Sea of Galilee with one of the many boats that take tours out there. And this is a big structure over top of it, so you can look down on it. But this was a octagonal church built. It's a remains of a church built over Peter's house at Capernaum. So every time they found something, they would build a church or something to commemorate it instead of saving the original building. And this is just a picture of the ruins of Capernaum. Just you could see that everything is pretty small. You know, the roadways. You know, this is kind of a, right here is kind of a roadway, but you aren't going to drive anything there but a horse maybe. They're pretty narrow. And just another view. And I found an illustration because this is where they dug through the roof to let the paralytic person down for Jesus to heal because they couldn't get in the house. And so this is a view of the flat roofs were flat. And as a matter of fact, where we stayed, their area that they held church services was a rock building, and they had sticks on the roof, and then they covered over top of it. But it was just sticks where was the basically trusses. I mean, it was pretty amazing. I'm not sure what they put on top, but they were all just flat roofs, so you could just dig a hole through. But most of a lot of that area is pretty dry. When we were up in Galilee, when we went to the Mount Beatitudes, it was like windy and 95 degrees, and it was a little bit humid. It was the most uncomfortable day there. And then this is a temple ruins at Capernaum, and some archaeologists believe that this was a Byzantine temple built on top of the original temple that Jesus would have went into when he was at Capernaum. And then this is at the city of Capernaum at the Sea of Galilee. So we just walked down to where the water was, kind of a calm little area. And this is Magdala, um, and this is where Mary Magdalene was from, hence her name from Magdalene. Um, but anyway, there was quite a there was a lot of ruins there. It was pretty amazing what they found. This is a mosaic, and I believe that they said that they felt that that was a area of worship, and they would just take different colored stones and put them down and form images or whatever, and you can see uh, the indentation right here. You kind of look at it and go, how'd that happen? But they said that they believed that one of the columns, when it fell over, it hit that and just crushed it. So more ruins at Magdala. And then this is a pool. You just wandering along the ruins, and there's a pool of water, and it looked crystal clear. And this is another one. It's not very far away, but another very clear pool of water. And then this is the church at Mount Beatitudes. So down the hill there would have been where he spoke the Beatitudes. And again, this was miserably hot that day when we were there. And that's in April. So this is our boat ride out on the Sea of Galilee. It was pretty fun. It was and our tour guide on the boat ride was a Christian, so he sang worship songs, and he had albums, so it was pretty neat. They did some worship on the boat. And this is a ruins of a church, again built by the Byzantines, um, and this is where it was in Gerasa, where Jesus delivered the man with the impure spirits. And so this is when Mark 5:1, they went across the lake to the region of the Gerasenes. When Jesus got out of the boat, a man with an impure spirit came from the tombs to meet him. This man lived in the tombs, and no one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain. So this was that area where this happened, and it's on the east side of the Sea of Galilee. So it's right along the edge of Galilee, but it's on the east side. And then this is at Gerasa, and this is an olive crushing stone. So that oblong stone on top would be on end, and it would rotate around, and they'd roll it around and crush the olives. And then when they got done crushing it, they would put it in this press and squeeze it, and then the oil would run out. And this is just pictures of the mosaic at the church ruins in Gerasa. Another picture of it. And this is where the legion demons drove a herd of pigs down a steep bank. And there was a sign there that said, this is where it happened. And our guide said, there really aren't many choices where it could have happened, because there aren't many steep banks into the Galilee. They usually, you can walk up to it, but this is one of those areas that was a steep bank going straight down. So this is where they believe the pigs went off into the Sea of Galilee and drowned. And this picture here is appropriate for today, since the war in Israel. So up in here, and I'm looking kind of north, and this is Israel here. That's the border right there. And this is Lebanon. And then this picture, I turned and was facing more more east. And so in this picture, this is the border right here, and this is Israel, and that's Lebanon over there. And I'm not sure if that I know there's some stuff going on, and I'm not sure if it's this area or not, but and this is a view from Mount Transfiguration to the valley below. And so that, in this verse, after 6 days, Jesus took with him Peter, James, and John, the brother of James, and led them high into the mountain by themselves. There he was transfigured before them. His face shone like the sun, and his clothes became as white as light. Just then there appeared before them Moses, Elijah, talking with Jesus. So this is where they believed, at least our guide believed, that this is where Mount Transfiguration happened. And it is way up there. I mean, it is quite a hill. And then up on the mount, there was some ruins that were, years later after Christ's time were built. But it was just kind of a unique area, a lot of rock, and then all the stones, pretty picturesque. It was pretty elaborate in its day. Now, this is an image. Now, Philip the Tetrarch built the city of Caesarea Philippi, which is way up north, close to the Lebanese border, and that's when we went to Lebanon, and then we went here. This is the Grotto of Pan. So the Grotto of Pan is actually this area right in here, and they used to be able to walk over there. And then this area was called, what did they call it? The Court of Pan and the Nymphs. This was known and this was interesting to me, this was known as the gates of Hades in Jesus' time. So in the verse where, and Larry Russell told us this about a year ago, and that was the first time I heard it. And then we go over there, and he takes us here and tells us the same story. So Jesus replied, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by flesh and blood, but by my Father in heaven. And I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it." So they were referring to this place of false worship, the gates of Hades, and I that was it's still surprising to me, but that's what they were referring to, is this false worship that went on there. And this hewn area in the rock was where the statue of Pan once stood. And this is the Grotto of Pan. So it used to be able to walk in front of it. There was actually a structure there. And there was animal sacrifices were held there. And this used to be location of a spring that flowed into the Jordan. And according to our guide, an earthquake occurred that destroyed the temple, and the spring quit flowing out of that cave. And now it flows about 50 yards behind me and to the right of when I took this picture. And I have some pictures of it after this. So this is an illustration of what it looked like. So that's the cave back in here that we saw, and then this is where that statue of Pan would have been. This was a temple built by Herod the Great, and it was what was it called? The Temple of Augustus, and it was built in honor of Caesar Augustus, who gave him the land. And so in Jesus' time, this would have all been here, but all this stuff was built later on after Christ's time. So it would have just been this that would have been here during Christ's time. And so if let's see, it's kind of hard to see, but So we're walking back from the Grotto of Pan on our pathway back to the parking lot, and right in here, there's those rocks there. There's water running out of those rocks, and that's where these headwaters of this stream come out of. And then this is on the other side of it. You can kind of see it right here, water just bubbling out of the rocks there. And then this picture is taken about 50 yards from where that water was flowing out of the rocks, and there's a big creek, stream, whatever they call it there. And it does flow into the Jordan. And this is the Sea of Galilee from Mount Arbel, where Jesus went to be alone while his disciples were crossing the lake. And so on this verse, Mark 6:45 through 48. Immediately Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and go ahead of him to Bethsaida while he dismissed the crowd. After leaving them, he went up on a mountainside to pray. Later that night, the boat was in the middle of the lake, and he was alone on land. He saw his disciples straining at the oars because the wind was against them. And what I find is interesting is if you look here, I mean, you can see all the way across the sea. There's, if it happened at night, it wouldn't take much of a moonlight, but you could see all the way across. So it always kind of struck me as he saw him struggling. But no matter, and he probably wasn't on the top, but it was an incredible view all the way across the lake. And there's just another view. The Sea of Galilee in this picture is off to the right, but it's just kind of a pretty area, big rocky knoll. And it's just up on top of Mount Arbel looking out at the Sea of Galilee. And this is the Cardo at Bet Shean, and where the Philistines hung the body of Saul and Jonathan. So in 1 Samuel 31:8, the next day when the Philistines came to strip the dead, they found Saul and his 3 sons fallen at Mount Gilboa. They cut off his head, stripped off his armor, and they sent messengers throughout the land of the Philistines to proclaim the news in the temple of their idols and among their people. They put the armor in the temple of the Ashtoreth and fastened his body to the wall at Bet Shean. So this was where the wall of this city where they hung him. And this is a theater at Bet Shean, and it's got the same design as Caesarea, about 180 degree theater with a stage in front. And then that's looking at the stage. And this is the Jordan River, and it's right above the Sea of Galilee. And you can see green there, but about where that church is in the background, there's probably no vegetation from that area on. It's all desert except for right in that Jordan Valley where the water flows. And if you notice, it's not really very big, and it's kind of muddy looking. They're not very clean. And so this is where they believe that John the Baptist actually baptized Jesus. And so there's lines of people there wanting to get baptized too. And yeah, just another view of it. And when we were there, they asked, do you want to get baptized? It was over 100 degrees that day. And we went, nope, we're ready to get back. But anyway, so that is it. I know I went into a lot of details, and some of it I probably shouldn't have done, but oh, shoot. I was trying to zoom in, but I couldn't do it. Yeah, he does. I wasn't really paying much attention to any individuals. I was just looking at the to try to get a picture. But and on the other side where that church is, that is in the country of Jordan. So we're on Israel, and across that river is Jordan. Well, I probably don't have the answer, but but if you do have any questions, what's that? Oh, the tombs. We were so far away, I couldn't tell if there was or not. Yeah, I don't know. And there was really that whole hillside was full of them, and it was behind us and off. I mean, it was just it was kind of shocking. Well, and everything is raw. I didn't point it out, but when Solomon was quarrying rock, he actually dug down, and part of the old wall, the which now would be the third wall, they are actually built over top of one of the caverns where he took rock out of. And I remember thinking, why would you build a city on top of where you're digging rock out of? you know, and it's a huge cavern that's like, I think he said it's like 3 acres. It's a huge area, and Solomon was quarrying rock out of it. And why he was doing underground instead of just cutting it above, I don't know. But yeah, the whole area of Jerusalem is just, I mean, the old city really fascinated me. That's why after because we never went on the Temple Mount, we never went to the city of David. And so I just started digging in and going, learning more. And when he was mentioning the 500 cubits by 500 cubits, I didn't read it, but in Ezekiel, God gave, or the visit, what was it, an angel, and gave him the measurements of of a whole temple and then the outside, and it was, and he said by a royal cubit, which is longer than a standard, and I mean, to me it's just amazing that that's 500 cubits. Yeah, and the Temple Mount today, they said, is about twice the size of the original. And so and I guess Herod actually, I thought he just filled it in, but I guess he built arches and then built on top of the arches. So there's tunnels and stuff underneath the temple that no one has access to it today, except the Muslims maintain control of that. Yeah. Herod, who are you talking about? Oh, Megiddo. Are they trying to do what? No, it's just uh, they got you go there and pay a fee and you go up and watch. It's a tourist attraction now, but the Jezreel Valley is really what they're referring to, where the Armageddon will take place. In that valley is what they believe, where they'll all march. But right now it's just mounds of ruins. And as a matter of fact, when they showed pictures, I had a picture of the temple, that round altar area, they dug way down to do it. And as a matter of fact, our guide said, yeah, they did excavation that is, they showed how not to do digs, but they wanted to see how far down they could go and find stuff. So they just dug a big trench, and it went down, I forgot how many layers. Oh, I think it was 27 layers of civilizations built. Yeah, it's pretty amazing what and they just, and of course, using rock, when it gets ruined, well, that's a good foundation. You build on top of it. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Oh, and I don't know if it's really off the subject of this, but they think that they found where Sodom and Gomorrah was, And this was probably about 10 years ago, but I read an article recently. The guy who found it, and they were always searching south of the Dead Sea, and this one archaeologist said, "Well, I read my Bible, and it said that Abraham and Lot, or Abraham was on the city of Ai and Bethel, I think, and looked into the fertile valley, and saw Sodom and Gomorrah. Well, that's way north of the Sea of Galilee, and so he goes, well, it's got to be along the Jordan River somewhere." And so they ended up getting permission to go into Jordan, so it had been on the east side of the Jordan River, and they started digging, and they just dug a tunnel trying to go down, a one hole just to see what they could find. And they said that they found some clay, like pottery, and they go, "Oh, this is the right era, except it's glazed." And they go, "Well, they didn't glaze it then. This doesn't make sense, but it looks like from the era, but it's glazed." And on that dig, they had an old guy that was on the Manhattan Project when they built the atomic bomb. He looked at that and he goes, "That looks like trinitite." And he goes, "Trinitite? What's trinitite?" And he goes, "Oh, that's what we named the sand when they blew off the atomic bomb. It glazed the sand, and it gave it a slight, because it got so hot so quick, it gave a thin glazing." He goes, "It looks just like it." So he brought it back, and sure enough, it said it looked like the glazing was caused by extreme heat, instantaneously short, which would explain a meteorite coming down and hitting a city, and and destroying sulfur and fire and brimstone, and that would be a good explanation of what happened. So they believe that that was where Sodom and Gomorrah happened, which is, it's really fascinating to me when science proves the Bible correct. Yeah. Oh, really? Oh, I think he said that there was like 1,000 years that nothing happened in between. Yeah, I remember it, because because you can find hits. Yeah, I think it was around 1,000 years. That, yeah. Well, and the same with Jericho. When they destroyed Jericho, it was like, don't build anything there. Well, Jericho exists today, but it was not supposed to, at least by. And of course, it's. Um, yeah, what's that? I don't know that it is. I think they think it's, at least in the